Posted by you/no rent. I want to share an experience I watched and felt while I was living in an abusive home. I'm just thinking about a weird thing that happened in my life some years ago, so I felt like sharing. Maybe someone else has experienced something like this or can explain it for me. I'll start by saying I am not a believer in the paranormal. I am a Christian, but I hardly believe in demonic or angelic experiences. I feel they are far too rare for average people to experience and can be explained away by science majority of the time. This happened, probably 6 years ago now? I'm 23 now and I believe this happened when I was around 16 or 17 years old. I lived with my mother, abusive stepfather, my younger sister and baby brother. I lived in the basement of the house just to get away from everything. It was my only escape. It muffled the arguing and fighting, that sort of thing, so it's where I opted to stay. For anyone curious, my parents are affluent, or in other words rich, and my stepfather had an influence in the community. CPS did not care, and the cops did not care. Many times we called the cops and many times CPS was called. Teachers and counselors and doctors were told. Nothing was ever done about it, so it got to the point we stopped reporting anything and just lived in our own hell. One night, after hours and hours of fighting and screaming and banging, I don't even know what was exactly happening. Neither of my siblings knew either. We are all avoidant types. If we can stay out of the fight to avoid being hurt ourselves, we did. The house suddenly went silent. It was a relief at first. I could finally go to bed. It was well after midnight at this point and I had school to attend in a few hours. As I was drifting off to sleep, I heard a blood-curdling scream from my mother. It was so loud from the upstairs of the house that I could hear it in the basement. I immediately ran out of my room. I thought she was being murdered or something. My one dog was throwing herself down the basement steps to get away as I was running the opposite direction up the stairs. I've never ran so fast to get upstairs, running through the kitchen and living room to get up to her. Me and my siblings met each other outside of her bedroom door to hear her vomiting profusely in the master bathroom. I broke down the door and saw her over the toilet throwing up everything she had. I asked her what was wrong and she wouldn't answer me. I noticed my stepfather was nowhere to be seen. My sister told me that he left the house and drove off. My brother was crying at this point and my sister was shaking. I didn't know what to do, so I just kept asking her what she needed, but she wouldn't talk to me. She would just throw up and sit staring into the toilet. Eventually my brother ran crying into my mom's bedroom and climbed into her bed. My other dog was already in bed, so he climbed on top of her and hugged her. My mom got up and walked past me into the bedroom after him. All the lights were off in her room, so as she walked she turned all of them on. I followed after my mother while my sister said she was exhausted but stood in the doorway and didn't move to go anywhere, just watching us. I went to ask my mother for the 100th time, what the hell was going on? She cut me off and said that she saw something evil. I joked and said, was it, insert stepdad's name here? She got mad and told me to just shut up and listen. My mother pointed up at the skylight in the ceiling. It was bright and I could see the moon in the clouds. She said she saw a pitch black figure crawl across the ceiling. I didn't believe her. I told her it was her imagination. She was still running on adrenaline and was just upset and needed to go to bed. She screamed at me, furious, saying that her imagination would never run so wild that she'd find herself throwing up over it. I told her that her stomach was probably just upset anyhow, and that's why she threw up. She told me she didn't care what I thought, so I just said okay, well, I'm going to bed myself, good night, that sort of thing, and turned off the lights for her. She was in bed with my brother, so I didn't see a reason on leaving them on when I was leaving the room. She shrieked at me to turn the fucking lights back on. So I did. Stunned, I turned around and asked why. She was quiet before telling me she didn't want to sleep in the dark. I don't know why this upset me, but I got mad and argumentative with her, that she didn't see anything, that she was fine and everyone just needed to go to sleep. I turned off the lights and shined my phone's flashlight up at the skylight and showed her nothing was there, everything was fine. I turned to her, while I was still holding the light up, to gesture to her that she was being irrational, and my sister in the hallway screamed, pointing and wailing at the skylight. I looked up and still saw nothing. I told my sister to be quiet, that she was making things worse, and she started yelling back at me that something was there. Something was on top of the skylight, but now it was gone. My mom then told my sister to get in bed with her, so she did. All three of them sat in the bed together, huddled up. I stood there staring, confused. How were they all seeing something that I wasn't? Then my brother screamed. The curtain that was covering the windows across the room blew back, and I turned around. And once again, nothing. While it was odd the curtains were flung open, nothing was out on the deck, nothing was outside at all. But he was adamant something was out there. I was even more angry at this point. I told them to stop acting crazy. There are far worse, real, things going on right now, and while everyone is screaming demon. My mother's husband could come back any moment and make things actually scary. My mother told me to turn the lights back on and just get the hell out of her room. So I did. I slammed her door behind me and went downstairs. I remember, vividly, checking out the front door's windows to make sure my sister was right, that my stepfather was really gone, and sure enough his truck was gone. I was pissed and tired, so I just went back down to my room. My 200-pound English Mastiff was in my bed, hiding her head in my pillows. I walked up to her and rubbed her back, and she turned back and snapped her teeth at me. I was shocked. This was not her behavior towards me, like, ever. I was mad and told her to get down, and so she did. She got out of my bed and laid down beside it. I hopped into bed and went to go back to sleep. Then I felt it. I felt two pairs of hands gliding across my back. At the same exact time my dog started barking furiously. I swear to God I thought I was going to shit myself. I jumped out of bed, turned on all the lights, but nothing. Nothing was there. I opened the curtains and looked outside, and still nothing. I remembering shaking so bad and my dog just kept growling in my general direction. What do you do in that situation other than fucking run? So I grabbed my dog's collar, and pulled us both out of my room. I ran upstairs with her following after me. I turned on every light as I ran. I ran through the kitchen, dining room, and living room all over again and kept turning on the lights as I went. I got upstairs to my mom's room. All the lights were still on and her door was closed, but I opened it and went in, my dog following after me. I didn't say anything. I climbed into bed with them, and my dog jumped up after me. All four of us slept her in queen-sized bed with our two dogs. I didn't sleep that night. My mom called us all out of school the next morning. My stepfather didn't come home until days later. I've never had a paranormal experience since. The abuse still continued. I don't know what to think of it these few years later. I've told people this story a few times, and every time, no one has an explanation for me. I'm not sure if anyone has a good way to explain what happened or maybe ease my mind, or if you even had a similar experience growing up in an abusive home. I don't know. But that's my shitty story. To ease your minds about my situation and my siblings' situations, my sister and brother still live with my mother and stepfather. While I no longer do, I moved out 3 years ago. But oddly enough, my mother's husband has mellowed out in his old age. Both my siblings have said he no longer fights like he used to. He's just petty and shitty and toxic, but not physically abusive like he used to be. He's not a good person to live with, but he's no longer targeting anyone. He just works long hours and doesn't come home until late, and my mom works long hours and works opposite schedules with him, so they rarely see each other. It's not a fun situation, but at least they are safe, according to them. If you made it this far, thanks for reading. I'm gonna wanna try and not think about this situation too much now, lol. Posted by you/Melredreda. Woman in a white night dress. Lots of years ago, when I was pregnant with my first child, her father and I were driving out of town to visit family for dinner. It was dark, and where we were headed was about 15 minutes out of town, down a rural road, and close to a beach. While we were driving, I looked out the window, and saw a pale woman, in a white night dress that was blowing in the wind. It struck me as odd, why she would be standing there of all places. She was say about 100 or so meters from a house, in the dark on a cold night wearing next to nothing. Her feet were bare. The creepiest feeling came over me, and I realized, after we had driven past, that the figure with the long flowing hair was semi-transparent. I was trying to decipher in my mind what I saw, trying to tell myself that I imagined it, when my partner suddenly said, "Did you just see a woman in a white dress, like a ghost? Or was it just me?" Posted by you/SkyNewELP. When I was a kid, I saw a strange thing, that I still can't explain. I want to say straightforward, I'm not that good of a story writer, but I hope to make it as understandable as possible. Also, English isn't my first language, so sorry for spelling mistakes. So, until I was 10, me and my family lived in a ghetto type of neighborhood, and I don't know why, but something always felt of in the apartment we were in. I would sometimes hear one of my parents call me or something knocking on wood. I brushed it off, since it is kind of normal to just hear someone call your name, even if they don't, and the knocking could just come from another apartment. But here is the thing. When I was around 6 or 7 years old, I would see tall, pure black humanoid creatures with big white eyes just in the corner of my eyes running around the corner. After some more encounters I tried running behind, but I never saw anything. Around that time I also started having nightmares about either me getting chased by supernatural creatures like zombies, which were probably just from me starting to watching child horror movies, or either from me waking up late at night and hearing footsteps or the front door open/closing. In the second scenario, I always stood up quietly, going through the apartment to look for the source of the noises, and every time I would find either that tall creature or a man with a briefcase in the living room. That briefcase contained things like knives or small blades. Either way, the creature/man would then proceed to go through the apartment and kill all of my family, at least that's what I think, because it would come back blood-coated. It would chase me to the outside of the apartment complex, and while running, everything would just turn black and I would wake up in sweat. That happened a few more times over the years, and the nightmares would suddenly just stop at some point. The thing with me seeing that tall, black creature ended when we moved. I'm still curious about how or why that happened. Also, it only happened to me. I asked my parents and my brother if they had some of these encounters, but they told me that they had experienced nothing like that. I hope you, dear Redditor, could explain all of it, or at least some of it, to me, since I to this date still don't get why that happened to me. Have a nice day. Posted by you/excitable. Childhood memory that has stuck with me. When I was about 4 or 5, I was at my grandmother's home, several stories from there, and it was a rainy spring day. I remember playing in the living room since I couldn't go out, but the front door was open, but the screen/glass exterior door was closed still. I noticed an old man dressed in a black suit, white shirt, large brimmed black hat standing at the end of the walk facing the door, 30 feet out. I remember he seemed out of place at the time, and it struck me, even at a young age, as being disturbing. I ran to get my grandma because everything about it scared me, and she sensed the terror and ran back to the front door area with me. When I looked down to the end of the walk, the man was nowhere to be seen, but chills ran down my spine as my grandmother placed a hand on my shoulder. Proceeded to back up slowly, and started yelling, "You get out of here." When I looked up at her, she had a glare and her eyes locked on the door and repeatedly yelled, "Get out of here," while pulling me back. I then looked at the upper half of the door where she was pointing and saw the old man standing what would have been inches from the glass portion, upper half, of the door, but I had just been inches from the lower half, screen, and saw nothing. He only appeared in the upper half of the door. My grandmother backed us up to the hallway, and when we got there she turned quickly and darted us off to the kitchen. I remember this so clearly. There were many other experiences in that home, but that one stands out and has stuck with me my entire life. Posted by you/abs not omega. My wife and daughter went overseas, but I heard my daughter calling out at night. When my daughter was 4, back in 2016, she'd have night terrors every night. Her room was down the hall. Every night, usually between 2 and 4 a.m., she'd call out "Mom" once or twice, and if we didn't answer, she'd run down the hallway and practically bust our door open, scaring the shit out of us. We had wooden floors, so the footsteps were loud. I'm a light sleeper, so I always heard her, but she'd be there before I could get up. My wife's grandma overseas was really sick and she wanted to go visit her for a few weeks with my daughter. I'd never really believed in the paranormal until one particular instance involving a jinn, in 2002, while stationed in Africa, that I mentioned in my previous post. Since then, I wouldn't dismiss things as easily as I used to, but I still tried to rationalize anything weird. When I came back from the airport, the house felt sort of eerie all of a sudden. It never did before, but tonight was just different. It felt like there were eyes on me everywhere. I'd converted to Islam in 2008 and I thought, hey, when in prayer, you're invincible to any evil, so let's just pray right in the middle of the dark corridor and give whatever it is the middle finger, figuratively. When it came for me to prostrate, I couldn't. It felt like there were people standing around me waiting to jump me. I had to break the prayer. That's a no-no usually unless it's something life-threatening. But I lost, I bitched out and I felt ashamed. So I went to my bedroom, closed the door and prayed again. Apparently if you show them fear, which I did, they become emboldened. I went to bed and at around 3 a.m. I heard my daughter call out "Mom." She was overseas with my wife, so I figured my mind is just used to her calling out every night and dismissed it. Admittedly, I was creeped out a little. The next night, the same thing happened. Again, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I stayed awake and started a book called Snow Crash. It was a great book, so I read for a while. The third night I was out with my friends at a cafe. I got home around 1 a.m. and I couldn't sleep, so I read the book. It was so good I lost track of time. Then I heard "Mom." This time I was awake though. Everything was dead silent and I was trying to concentrate on whether I actually heard it or not. Then there it was again, "Mom," but it sounded off. I didn't even have a chance to be creeped out enough before I heard footsteps running down the corridor towards my room. Before they got to my door, all I could manage was "No." And they stopped. I was shaking. Like, man, I've seen war, but this was a different level of fear, you know. I read every prayer I knew and gathered the courage to step out. I turned on every light in the house, recited an incantation in every room and closed the doors. I pulled every door closed and checked that it was indeed latched. I didn't sleep. But when I got up the next morning to make breakfast, my daughter's bedroom door was open, only hers. I slept at my mum's house for the next few weeks. When my wife got back, I told her and she called me a bitch. It's just Jin all nonchalant. I guess if it were, they were more afraid of her. Hell, I was afraid of her. Posted by you/Gurif-en. My old letter friend came back. Please read and answer me if you can. So, when I was about 11, I would love to ride my bike. I could do it for hours. One day, I decided to go to the forest. It was near the village I was living in, 1 kilometer away. Around 40 meters away from it, I noticed something. It was something white in the grass. On the left side of the road, under an rock, there was a piece of paper, with an rock on it. On the paper was written with charcoal hello. As an dumb kid, I came back the next day. The paper piece was still there, but when I got there, I had also a piece of paper with the word hi written on it. Then, I came back the next day too, and was written on it how are you. I had paper and pencil at me, and I wrote back, I'm good, you? Things were going really good. Once, I tried staying there the entire day and night, to find out who was the dude that was writing those. I told my parents I would stay at a friend. It was in a veil, no one came. Time passed and me and it became really good friends. We would have conversations, we grew really close. One day, not intentionally, we just stopped talking. I came to the place less and less, until I stopped. The last letter I remember the thing he wrote, was gonna miss you. Around 20 years passed, I'm 32, and I found written on paper with charcoal, with a and rock on top, in the front of my house missed me? So, this is my most sincere what the fuck. No one knew about that so that he would play and prank, what the fuck. One day passed, I took the paper inside my house, left it inside my drawer. I am not sure how to feel about this, but I am somehow happy that he came back. If he ain't some evil shit ready to murder me, I don't think it is. Any thoughts are welcome.